She came to finalize the divorce. The Alpha King froze when he realized she was 8 months pregnant. The castle of King Alurin rose from the cliffs like a shadow carved from stone. Its towers clawed at the sky, blackened by centuries of storms, yet gleaming faintly under the pale light of the crescent moon. Servants whispered in the corridors as they moved, their eyes flicking toward the main hall. Rumor had it the Alpha King rarely saw visitors, and never one like her. Isolde walked through the grand entrance, her cloak brushing against the cold marble floor. She had not set foot in the castle in years. Every echo of her steps felt like a warning and a memory all at once. Today she had come to finalize the divorce, a document meant to erase her past with Alurin. Yet her heart beat unevenly, betraying the calm she tried to show. The guards recognized her immediately. A hush fell across the hall. Even the banners hanging high above, embroidered with the symbol of the Alpha King's bloodline, seemed to sway in anticipation, though the air was still. Inside the throne room, Alurin sat rigidly, his posture perfect, as if the weight of the crown and the kingdom rested entirely upon his shoulders. His eyes were dark, sharp, and calculating, the eyes of a man who had never known weakness. He had been expecting her for the divorce papers, yes, but he had not been expecting this moment. Then she stepped forward and the world seemed to shift. The first thing he noticed was her presence, confident, yet wary. Then, almost imperceptibly, his gaze fell lower. There, beneath the folds of her dress, was a subtle curve he had never expected to see. A gasp lodged in his chest, though no sound escaped. 8 months. She was 8 months pregnant. Alurin froze, the words catching in his throat. Time seemed to halt, and the room itself waited with bated breath. The lords and servants sensed the tension but dared not move. The air between them was a mixture of shock, disbelief, and an old, familiar ache. Isolde met his gaze steadily. She did not flinch, though she had prepared for anger, for rejection, perhaps even for hatred. Instead, she found the Alpha King speechless, a rare sight. Alurin, the man who commanded armies and nations, who inspired fear and loyalty in equal measure, now appeared fragile in a way no one had ever seen. Finally, he found his voice, though it was low, almost strangled. "You are carrying my child." Isolde inclined her head slightly. "Yes," she said softly. Her words were calm, measured, and final. There was no plea in her voice, no demand. It was simply a truth that existed, whether he accepted it or not. The room grew colder as Alurin struggled to process her revelation. Memories flooded back, laughter in sunlit gardens, secret conversations in the library, the nights they had spent planning a future that now felt like a lifetime ago. He had loved her once, with a depth he had never allowed himself to feel for anyone else. Yet his ambition, his obsession with control, and his fear of vulnerability had driven her away. Now she returned, not with anger but with life growing inside her, a life that carried both their bloodlines, both their legacies. The silence stretched. Alurin's hands clenched into fists at his sides. He wanted to speak, to demand answers, to unravel the mystery of why she had hidden this from him. Yet every instinct he had, every lesson learned in war and court, seemed useless against the simple, undeniable truth: he was to be a father. "Why didn't you tell me?" he finally managed, his voice rough. Isolde's eyes softened, though her expression remained calm. "I had to protect him and myself," she said, placing a hand gently on her belly. "There are forces in this kingdom that would harm us. I could not risk it." Alurin's heart throbbed with a mixture of fear and awe. He had faced armies, dragons of the northern mountains, assassins who moved like shadows, yet he had never felt this way. He could protect kingdoms, but could he protect her? Could he shield the child growing within her? The Alpha King rose slowly, his cloak brushing the floor. His gaze remained fixed on Isolde, every inch of him tense, as if he were a predator sizing up a threat, yet the threat was not her. It was the truth itself, raw and unavoidable. "You kept this from me," he said again, voice low, almost a growl. After everything, his sentence trailed off, unspoken words hanging in the air. Regret, fear, longing, emotions he had buried deep within himself, clawed their way to the surface. Isolde stepped forward, her eyes unwavering. "I did what I had to," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "I would rather face you now than let anyone else harm him." The child. The word echoed in Alurin's mind. His child. The weight of it pressed against him, heavier than any crown, sharper than any blade. He had spent years building walls around his heart, walls that no one had breached until now. Alurin's advisors shifted uncomfortably, sensing the change in the air. Their king, the alpha of all alphas, was no longer simply a ruler. He was a man caught between past mistakes and a future he had not anticipated. He took a tentative step closer to Isolde, as if drawn by an invisible thread. Every movement, every breath between them was charged with tension, a mixture of fear, longing, and unspoken promises. He wanted to reach for her to protect her, yet he did not know if she would allow it. "Isolde," he said finally, his voice softer, almost reverent, "you have changed everything." She met his gaze, a flicker of sadness passing through her eyes. "I did what I had to," she repeated, though this time there was an edge of plea beneath the calm. "But you can choose to be part of this child's life, or not." The Alpha King's jaw tightened. Pride and duty warred with the unfamiliar surge of emotion in his chest. He had conquered kingdoms, faced death, and commanded loyalty through fear, yet nothing had prepared him for this moment. A life, half his own, depended on her. And perhaps, for the first time, he realized that some things could not be conquered by strength alone. A distant bell tolled from the castle towers, its echo filling the throne room. The sound reminded him of time, the relentless march of hours and days that would not wait for hesitation or regret. He had to act. He had to decide. Isolde placed a hand over her belly again, feeling the gentle stir of life within. Her heart raced, not just from the moment with Alurin, but from the danger that lingered in the shadows of the castle. There were those who would see this child as a threat, as a weapon to seize power. She had protected the secret for months, moving silently, hiding in plain sight, always aware that discovery could mean disaster. Alurin's eyes darkened with resolve, though a storm of emotion still raged within him. He took another step forward, closing the distance between them. For the first time, he allowed himself to feel the full weight of what he had lost and what he might yet regain. "I should have known," he murmured almost to himself. "I should have seen you." Isolde's lips pressed into a thin line, a mix of hope and caution. She did not yet trust the change in him, not fully. Trust was earned, not demanded. She had survived on her own, and she would not allow the past to repeat itself. Alurin extended a hand slowly, hesitantly, as if testing the waters of a world he had not entered in years. Isolde looked at it, then at his eyes, searching for the truth behind the shadow of the Alpha King she once loved. "I am here now," he said finally, voice low and certain. "I will protect you and him, no matter what it takes." The declaration hung in the air, heavy with meaning. It was more than a promise. It was the beginning of a reckoning, a turning of fate that neither of them could yet fully understand. A distant crash echoed from the castle gates, and both of them turned instinctively. The threat that had haunted Isolde's secret life was closing in. A shadow flickered along the outer wall, a warning that danger was nearer than they thought. Alurin's eyes blazed with fury and determination. The Alpha King, who had faced countless battles, now faced the fight of his life, not for a kingdom, but for the woman he had loved and the child he had never known. Isolde's fingers brushed lightly against his hand, the smallest touch bridging years of distance and pain. For a fleeting moment, the weight of fear lifted, replaced by something fragile yet powerful, hope. Yet the danger remained, and the castle walls seemed to whisper that their battle had only just begun. Cliffhanger, Alurin's voice was barely a whisper, yet it carried the force of a king and a lover combined. And as the shadow on the outer walls moved closer, the throne room held its breath, knowing that the true storm was only beginning. The moon hung low over the castle, casting silver streaks across the courtyard. The stone walls, tall and unyielding, seemed to whisper secrets to anyone who would listen. Alurin stood at the balcony of his private chamber, gazing down at the shadows moving along the outer walls. His heart, which had long been a fortress of pride and discipline, now beat with an unfamiliar urgency. Isolde had been escorted to a room near the eastern wing, her movements quiet but deliberate. Even 8 months pregnant, her presence filled the space with a strange energy. Alurin could not forget how she had walked into the throne room earlier, calm and composed, revealing the secret he had never imagined. Her courage had both angered and fascinated him. For hours, the two of them had spoken in careful, measured words. Every sentence carried weight. Every pause felt like a battle. Isolde did not beg, and Alurin did not command. Instead, they stood on the edge of something neither had dared to name, a fragile bridge between past mistakes and future possibilities. The Alpha King finally descended from the balcony, his cloak brushing the floor. Servants quickly cleared the corridor ahead of him, though their eyes remained wide, sensing the tension that filled the air. He moved not as a king commanding his court, but as a man following a single, pressing purpose, to understand the woman he had lost and the child she carried. Isolde awaited him in her room. Her hands rested lightly on her belly, and her gaze, calm yet wary, met his as he entered. "You should rest," he said, though his voice carried no command, only concern. "I cannot rest," she replied softly. "Not while the child and I are in danger." Her words were a gentle warning, but there was an undeniable steel beneath them. "I have kept this secret for months. Many would have taken advantage if they had known. I cannot trust anyone fully, not even you yet." Alurin's jaw tightened. He had faced armies and treacherous nobles alike, yet nothing had prepared him for the vulnerability he felt now. Protecting her required more than strength. It demanded trust, patience, and an understanding of a world he had long tried to master with sheer power. "Then tell me," he said, voice low. "Tell me everything. I need to know." Isolde took a deep breath. She spoke slowly, as if measuring each word. "The kingdom has enemies who see your child as a key, a symbol of power. There are those who would kill us to claim it, to use it for their own gain." Alurin felt a surge of protective fury. The Alpha King, who had commanded fear across nations, now felt an urge stronger than any sword or army. He would protect the child and the mother. "Why did you keep this from me?" he demanded, though not harshly. "Why face such danger alone?" "I could not risk it," she replied, her voice steady. "I needed to move quietly. I had to make sure that when the time came, I could bring him into the world safely. That was the only way." Her words resonated with him, though they also filled him with guilt. He had failed her before, letting ambition and pride drive them apart. Now he had a chance to make it right. Yet the question remained, could he regain her trust after all they had lost? As the night deepened, Alurin and Isolde walked through the castle's moonlit gardens. The statues of long-dead kings and queens stood like silent witnesses to their conversation. The air smelled faintly of frost and stone, and every step echoed in the quiet night. "You have changed," Alurin said at last. "You are stronger than I imagined. Strong enough to face threats alone, yet gentle enough to carry life within you." Isolde's lips curved faintly. "I had to," she said simply. "I survived because I had no choice, but surviving is not enough, not for him." Her gaze shifted to the castle walls. "I will do whatever it takes to protect him. That is why I am here, facing you even now." For a moment, Alurin felt the weight of time between them, years of misunderstandings, silence, and heartbreak. And yet he could see a path forward, though it would not be easy. He had spent his life mastering kingdoms and battles, but mastering this, love, trust, and fatherhood, was a challenge unlike any other. The moonlight illuminated her face, pale and determined. "You do not need to forgive me," she added, almost as if reading his thoughts. "But you must understand, I acted for him, not against you." Alurin nodded, swallowing hard. "I see that now, and I will not fail him, I will not fail you." A sudden noise shattered the quiet. From the far edge of the garden came a rustling, barely audible, yet unmistakable. Both turned sharply. The castle's shadows seemed to grow longer, darker, as though aware of the presence approaching. Isolde's hand instinctively rested on her belly. "They are closer than I thought," she whispered. "I feared it would come to this so soon." Alurin's instincts took over. He moved to place himself between her and the shadows, his presence radiating both authority and protection. "No one will harm you," he said, voice low and commanding. "Not here, not while I stand." The movement in the shadows paused. A figure stepped forward, cloaked and hooded, yet Alurin could feel the danger radiating from them. His hand fell to the hilt of his ceremonial sword, but Isolde shook her head gently. "Not yet," she said. "If you strike, you risk drawing attention. We must be smart, not just strong." Alurin obeyed, reluctantly lowering his hand, but his eyes never left the figure. The moment stretched, the tension so thick it could be cut with a blade. The figure retreated, vanishing into the darkness, leaving only a warning in their wake. "They are testing us," Isolde said quietly, "seeing how much we have changed, how much we care for each other." Her words, though calm, carried a heavy weight, acknowledgment of the old love that still lingered between them. Alurin turned toward her. "Then we must be ready. Not just for them, but for what comes next. I will not let anything harm you or him." Her eyes met his, searching for truth. For a moment, the years of pain, loss, and misunderstanding seemed to melt away, leaving only the raw connection they had once shared. "You have changed," she said softly. "Not just stronger, but different, more open. I see it now." Alurin swallowed. "And you have always been brave," he said. "Brave enough to face danger alone, strong enough to carry a life into the world, and wise enough to know when to ask for help." The wind swept through the garden, carrying with it the scent of frost and stone, and the distant sound of the sea against the cliffs. It was a night of reckoning, a night where the past and present collided and the future remained uncertain. They walked back toward the castle together, their steps slow, deliberate, and filled with unspoken understanding. Alurin remained alert, scanning every shadow, while Isolde remained poised, trusting him without fully yielding control. In the quiet of the eastern wing, Alurin finally broke the silence. "You have endured so much," he said, voice low and filled with emotion. "And yet here you are, standing before me unafraid. I cannot ignore that, I will not." Isolde's hand brushed against his arm, a fleeting touch, but one that spoke volumes. "Then we face this together," she said. "Not as king and queen, not as past lovers, but as guardians of what is most precious." The castle seemed to listen, its walls heavy with history and secrets. Outside, the wind carried whispers of old prophecies, of curses, and of the bloodline that now stirred within her. The child she carried was more than a life. It was a spark of destiny that could alter the course of kingdoms. Alurin's resolve hardened. He would protect her and their child, no matter the cost. He had faced death countless times on battlefields, yet the thought of losing them filled him with a fear he had never known. Not even the fiercest enemy could challenge him as strongly as his own love and guilt. They stood together by the window, gazing out at the moonlit castle courtyard, and for the first time in years, they shared a moment of quiet understanding. The storm was coming both within the castle and within their hearts, but they would face it side by side. Cliffhanger, from the shadowed ramparts above, a figure watched them. Cloaked in black, eyes glowing faintly in the moonlight, the observer raised a hand and whispered a single word that sent a chill down both their spines. Shadows clung to the corners of every hall, and the torches flickered as though afraid of what was coming. Alurin stood in the throne room, his fingers brushing the intricate carvings of the armrest. The throne, usually a symbol of control and power, now felt like a cage. For years it had represented his authority, his dominance, his certainty. But now it could not shield him from what truly mattered, the life of the child growing inside Isolde and the woman he had once loved. Isolde rested in the eastern wing, wrapped in blankets as she moved slowly across the room. Her hand never left her belly, as if communicating silently with the life within. Every stir of the child sent a pang of both fear and awe through her heart. She had endured so much in silence, carrying not only the child but the knowledge that dark forces watched from the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Alurin entered the room quietly, his footsteps soft against the stone floor. For the first time, he did not come as a king demanding obedience or respect. He came as a man seeking understanding, hoping that she would allow him to share the burden. "Isolde," he said, his voice low, almost reverent, "we cannot wait any longer. I need to know everything, the prophecy, the curse, the threats. If we are to protect him, I must understand." She turned toward him, eyes steady yet wary. "I have told you the truth already, but there are parts you do not yet know. Things I have hidden even from myself for fear of what they could bring." Alurin stepped closer, unwavering. "Then tell me. I will bear the truth no matter how dark." She inhaled deeply, then began. "Long before I came to this castle, my bloodline was marked by a curse. It is tied to love, betrayal, and childbirth. If the child is born under the wrong conditions, the curse will awaken and bring disaster, not only to him but to the kingdom itself. I kept it secret because I feared what knowledge could do. Some would use it to control or destroy us." Alurin's eyes darkened with concern. "Then we must act. We cannot allow the curse to come to life. We must prepare together." Her gaze softened slightly, though a shadow of fear lingered. "You do not yet understand. The prophecy says that only when love and trust exist between the child's parents can the curse be held at bay. Otherwise, it will rise." Alurin's jaw tightened. He had conquered armies, defeated treacherous nobles, and faced death countless times, yet he now felt powerless. Love and trust, feelings he had buried for years, were the very forces that could save or doom them all. "I will do whatever it takes," he said firmly, placing a hand lightly over hers, though he did not touch her belly. "I will earn that trust if it is what we need to save him. I will not fail you or him." The moonlight shifted through the tall windows, casting silver light on their faces. For a fleeting moment, they were not king and woman, nor lovers torn apart by time and pain. They were simply two people bound by a life that neither could ignore. But outside, danger was already moving. The cloaked figure from the garden had returned, accompanied by others who moved like shadows themselves. They were silent, patient, and deadly. Their eyes glowed faintly in the darkness, and they whispered to one another in voices like the rustling of leaves. They were waiting for the right moment, for a moment of weakness, for a crack in their armor. Alurin sensed their presence immediately. His instincts, honed by years of leadership and battle, told him they were close. Yet he also sensed that brute strength alone would not be enough. The curse, the prophecy, and the child's life required strategy, not just swords. "We cannot fight them with weapons alone," he said. "We must use knowledge, cunning, and trust. I need you to trust me, Isolde." Her eyes studied him, searching for sincerity, for proof that he had truly changed. She had seen him command armies, enforce laws, and strike fear into the hearts of enemies, but could he now command his own heart? Could he protect them without letting pride or anger take over? "I want to trust you," she admitted softly, "but we must be cautious. Too much exposure and they will strike. I have spent months preparing, moving quietly, watching and waiting. One wrong step could destroy everything." Alurin nodded, understanding the gravity of her words. He would follow her lead, but he would also ensure that nothing, no enemy, no curse could harm them. He felt the weight of responsibility like never before. Not for a throne, not for a kingdom, but for life itself. Together, they planned. They moved through secret corridors, explored hidden chambers, and studied the old tomes stored in the library. The book spoke of ancestors, curses, prophecies, and magic, all interwoven with the bloodline that now flowed through the child's veins. Each page revealed the stakes, the kingdom, their lives, and the very balance of power depended on their choices. Alurin watched Isolde as she read aloud, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. She was not just a mother, she was a protector, a scholar, and a strategist. His admiration deepened, though it was tinged with guilt. He had abandoned her once, and he had allowed ambition to blind him to love. Now he could only hope to make amends. Night after night they worked together. Alurin learned to listen, to respect her instincts, and to value her courage. Slowly, the walls he had built around his heart began to crumble, replaced by something fragile and yet powerful, the possibility of redemption. But even as they strengthened their defenses, the enemies outside remained a looming threat. The cloaked figures watched, studied, and tested them, sending subtle warnings and minor attacks to gauge their responses. Each encounter sharpened their skills, strengthened their bond, and reminded them that the curse and prophecy were ever present. One evening, as a crimson sunset bathed the castle in light, Alurin found himself standing at the edge of the eastern balcony. He watched Isolde moving gracefully through the courtyard below, her cloak trailing behind her, her hand resting on her belly. He realized then that she was more than a woman, more than a lover he had lost. She was the key to the child's survival, the keeper of knowledge, and the embodiment of courage. He descended to join her. The air between them was filled with unspoken words, the weight of history, and the spark of something that refused to be denied. "You are remarkable," he said quietly. "You have carried so much, faced so much, and yet you stand tall. I am not worthy of your strength, Isolde." She looked up at him, her eyes reflecting both moonlight and emotion. "You are worthy, Alurin," she replied softly. "If you are willing to learn, to trust, and to fight for what matters, then you are worthy. But you must act, not just speak." Alurin nodded, feeling a determination unlike any he had known. He would act. He would protect her. He would protect their child. And he would confront the darkness that sought to claim what was rightfully theirs. The night deepened, and a chill wind swept through the castle. From the highest tower, a horn sounded faintly, a warning, or perhaps a challenge. The cloaked observers had moved again, signaling that the time was near. Alurin and Isolde shared a look of understanding. They would face whatever came together, but they also knew that the coming days would test them like never before. The prophecy, the curse, and the enemies waiting in the shadows would not yield. And then, as the first stars appeared in the night sky, the air in the courtyard shimmered faintly. Magic, old and powerful, stirred in response to the child's presence. The castle itself seemed to tremble, acknowledging that the fate of the bloodline was now entwined with destiny in ways neither Alurin nor Isolde could fully control. They returned to the throne room, planning their next moves. Each choice carried weight. Each action could tip the balance of power, trust, and survival. Alurin realized that this was not just a battle of strength, but of wisdom, courage, and love, qualities that he would have to learn anew. Isolde placed a hand over her heart, feeling the rapid beat of both her own and her child's life. "Whatever happens," she said, "we must face it together. There is no other way." Alurin knelt before her, something he had never done for any queen or subject. "I am yours," he whispered. "For him, for you, for us. Nothing will break that vow." For a moment the castle was silent, as if holding its breath. And then from the shadows of the northern tower, a faint glow appeared, eyes watching, waiting, and planning. The enemy had chosen their moment, and soon the walls of the castle would face their first real test. Cliffhanger. The wind carried a single chilling message, whispered faintly through the corridors. "Prepare, for the curse will not wait." The castle shivered under a restless wind. Shadows stretched long across the walls, and torches flickered as if they sensed the tension rippling through the stones. For nights, Alurin and Isolde had prepared, studying the prophecy, learning the secrets of the curse and strengthening their defenses. Now the final test had come. In the eastern wing, Isolde rested upon a bed, her breathing slow and deliberate. The child inside moved with growing urgency, stirring as if sensing the danger outside. Every muscle in her body tensed, every instinct alert, yet she remained calm. She had faced fear before, but this was different. The shadow of the curse loomed closer with every passing moment. Alurin stood by the window, gazing into the dark courtyard below. His hands rested lightly on the marble sill, though his mind was far from idle. Every step he had taken, every moment of the past weeks had led to this. He had confronted armies, traitors, and assassins, but now he faced a challenge unlike any before, to protect life, love, and legacy all at once. "Are you ready?" he asked softly, turning to her. His voice, usually so commanding, held vulnerability now, a quiet plea for strength and trust. Isolde's eyes met his, steady and unwavering. "I am," she said. "But we must be careful. The curse will strike when it senses fear, weakness, or division. We must be united not only in strength but in heart." Alurin nodded. "Then we face it together. Nothing will separate us." For hours the castle remained eerily quiet. The shadows seemed to move with a life of their own, curling along the walls and ceilings. From the northern tower a faint glow pulsed, the eyes of the cloaked observers watching, waiting, and whispering threats into the night air. They had been patient, testing every precaution, every weakness. Now the time had come. Suddenly the air trembled. A low hum filled the halls like the murmur of voices long dead. The torches flickered violently, casting dancing shadows across the walls. Isolde gasped, clutching her belly as the child stirred urgently. "They are here," she whispered, her voice calm but filled with tension. "The curse will awaken if we falter." Alurin moved to her side, taking her hand in his. "Then we will not falter," he said, his tone firm and unwavering. "I am with you. We face this together." The castle doors rattled violently as unseen forces struck against them. The shadowed figures moved with precision, their presence cold and powerful. Magic swirled in the air, a dark energy tied to the prophecy and the child. It was a test, not of strength alone, but of courage, unity, and love. Isolde took a deep breath, focusing on the child within. She whispered words of protection, a silent promise that no harm would come to their life. Alurin mirrored her resolve, drawing his sword and moving to the center of the room, radiating authority and determination. The shadows advanced, and the battle began not of swords against swords, but of wills against destiny. The cloaked figures unleashed the energy of the curse, testing their courage, probing their unity. Every flicker of fear would awaken the ancient magic that had slept for centuries. Alurin and Isolde moved together, their steps synchronized, their hearts beating as one. She guided him with knowledge, he protected her with strength. Their bond, rebuilt from years of loss and misunderstanding, became the shield that deflected the dark power threatening them. Minutes stretched into hours, and the castle trembled under the weight of the conflict. The torches dimmed, shadows clashed, and a strange, humming energy filled the throne room. And then, as the child stirred violently, a wave of magic surged, not destructive but protective. The prophecy had been tested. The curse sought to awaken, but it encountered unity, courage, and love. The child, guided by the mother's heart and the father's resolve, became a living anchor, holding the darkness at bay. Alurin held Isolde close, whispering words of encouragement as they felt the energy shift. "We are stronger than it knows," he said. "Together we will survive this." Isolde nodded, though exhaustion tugged at her. "We must hold a little longer. It is almost ready to pass." And then, as the first light of dawn brushed against the castle walls, a sudden calm fell. The shadows receded, the energy dissipated, and the castle stood still, quiet and serene. The test had ended, and the curse had been held at bay not by power alone, but by love, trust, and courage. Alurin and Isolde sank to the floor, leaning against one another, hearts pounding with relief and exhaustion. The child moved gently now, as if recognizing the safety surrounding them. For the first time in months, a smile broke across Isolde's face, a smile of victory, of survival, and of hope. "You did it," Alurin whispered, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "We did it." "Together," she nodded, her eyes shining. "Yes, together." The castle itself seemed to breathe with relief. The shadows that had haunted the walls for centuries faded into memory, and the light of the rising sun cast golden warmth across the throne room. The prophecy, once a threat, now felt like a promise, a future that could be shaped by their courage, their choices, and their love. As the day unfolded, messengers arrived to report that the cloaked figures had disappeared, leaving no trace of their presence. It was as if the darkness itself had been defeated, not by force alone, but by the unbreakable bond between Alurin and Isolde. Days later, in the quiet of the eastern wing, Isolde gave birth to a healthy child. The baby's cries filled the room, a sound of life and hope that pushed away the last remnants of fear. Alurin held the child in his arms, his eyes reflecting awe, love, and a deep, unspoken promise. "You are our legacy," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "And I vow to protect you always." Isolde rested against him, her hand on the child's small body. "We will protect him together," she said, "no matter what comes." For the first time in years, Alurin felt peace. Not the peace of victory over kingdoms, but the peace of hearts reunited, of love rekindled, and of a future that was theirs to shape. The Alpha King had faced his greatest challenge, not in battle, but in trust, humility, and devotion. And he had emerged not only victorious but transformed. In the weeks that followed, the kingdom began to heal. Alurin's court marveled at the changes in their king, his decisions now tempered by wisdom, compassion, and a newfound understanding of love. Isolde stood beside him, not as a subject, not as a former lover, but as a partner, an equal, and a mother. Together, they rebuilt the kingdom, fortified not just by walls and armies, but by the strength of their bond. Even the prophecy, once a source of fear, became a guide. The child, a symbol of hope and legacy, brought light to the darkest corners of the kingdom. The curse, held at bay by love and unity, served as a reminder that power alone could not shape destiny, only courage, trust, and devotion could. Alurin often found himself gazing at Isolde and their child, marveling at the life they had created together. The years of regret, loss, and mistakes had been transformed into wisdom, understanding, and love. And in that transformation, they had found not only survival but redemption. One evening, as the sun set in shades of gold and crimson, Alurin and Isolde walked together through the castle gardens. Their child rested peacefully in a cradle nearby, the soft lullaby of life filling the air. The wind carried the scent of flowers and the promise of new beginnings. "You came to end us," Alurin said softly, taking her hand in his. "But instead, you gave us a beginning." Isolde smiled, leaning into him. "We ended what was broken and we began what is whole," she replied. They stood together, watching the sun dip below the horizon. Shadows still lingered in the corners of the world, but within the castle walls, light and love had triumphed. The Alpha King and the woman who had once left him now faced the future side by side, stronger, wiser, and united. The kingdom would remember the events of these months as a time of trials, but for Alurin and Isolde, it was the beginning of a life that neither fear, curse, nor prophecy could destroy. They had faced darkness, faced themselves, and emerged not only victorious but transformed. And in the quiet of that evening, as the stars began to pierce the sky, the Alpha King whispered a final vow. "No darkness, no shadow, and no threat will ever come between us again. We are together, and we are unbreakable." The castle, once a fortress of fear, now stood as a beacon of hope, love, and new beginnings. The story of Alurin, Isolde, and their child would live on, a legend of courage, trust, and redemption, a testament to the power of love that could overcome even the darkest of curses.